Well, hello again. This is Greg Brennan with Virginia Clean Cities. I'm a program coordinator here, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's Technology Happy Hour, where we talk all things clean fuels. Today's special guest is Tom.Hopkins, the Regional Business Development Manager for Roush Clean Tech. But before we get to our feature presentation today, if you have any questions or want to get a hold of either of us, the contact information for Tom or myself is below. Feel free to send us an email, or you can comment on this video directly, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So moving forward, if you would like to be included on these presentations when they happen live here with Virginia Clean Cities, feel free to follow the link to our website to join our mailing list. You may also become a stakeholder and be featured on one of these. If you're interested in doing that, again, feel free to contact me. And with that, I would like to give a little intro for Tom here. Tom, in being the Regional Business Development Manager for Roush Clean Tech, his focus has been on educating school districts and commercial fleets and the public on the environmental and economic benefits of propane-powered school buses and commercial fleet vehicles. With more than 21 years of fleet management experience, combined with 15 years of propane and auto gas experience, Tom has become a trusted expert in his field. With a deep understanding of the unique requirements of these industries, he has successfully forged strong partnerships with key stakeholders, including fleet managers and transportation authorities. Tom's passion for sustainable transportation solutions is evident in his approach. He consistently goes above and beyond for his partners and customers and has been instrumental in promoting propane as a clean, cost-effective, and reliable alternative fuel source. His ability to build long-lasting relationships and foster trust has earned him a solid reputation as a go-to resource in the industry. So with that, let's pass it over to Tom.
As Greg introduced, I've been around propane for more than 15 years now. I was a fleet and operations manager for 21 years before joining Roush. So I've got a considerable amount of experience managing fleet, managing operations, and also working with auto gas closely, which makes my job a little bit easier because I can see a lot of different perspectives when I'm talking to customers or people that are interested in propane or people that are just wanting to know more about how to use propane in a fleet and how to make it work successfully. So I'll dive right in and just talk a little bit about Roush. To begin with, Roush is a privately held company, started in 1996 from Jack Roush. We are privately held and we employ about 5,000 employees across the globe. We have over 3 million square feet of office development and testing space, among other things, throughout all those regions. We have expertise, almost 50 years of expertise in product development, and we do a lot of activities for various industries, including design, engineering, prototype testing, and manufacturing. The four main brands under the Roush umbrellas, of course, Roush Industry, which is our mothership, so to speak. That's we do the OEM manufacturing, engineering, prototype testing, design, all those engineering activities that make Roush Roush. The most visible brand is probably the racing brand, Roush Fenway Kozlowski Racing, who's starting to have a lot of success in the last couple of years. We won last weekend at Watkins Glen with Chris Buescher. So fantastic outing for us this past week. Roush Performance Products has been around since the 70s doing the high-performance Mustangs, F-150s, F-250s, Broncos, all the sexy stuff that you see on the road. And then Roush Clean Tech is the newest company under that umbrella, founded officially in 2010 to promote clean alternative energy fuels for automobile fleets. Our focus has been on propane, but just the markets we serve, even though we're going to talk a lot about propane today with Roush Clean Tech, we do a ton with mobility, defense, entertainment, aerospace, and beyond. Here recently, we've had a tremendous focus on doing electric programs, autonomous vehicle programs, and supporting those startups that are trying to get their product to market in those different spaces. So even though from a clean tech perspective, our focus has primarily been propane, we've done a little bit with battery electric, we've done a little bit with CNG. Roush as a whole is interested in all different fleet alternative fuels to drive the country and the globe forward. Our progress at Clean Tech, all in, we've delivered over 50,000 vehicles. We've accumulated more than 2 billion miles, and we're present in over 3,500 fleets across North America. We do have a small footprint outside of North America, but the bulk of our business is happening here in the US and Canada. We've got this great partnership that we have with Bluebird Bus manufacturer down in Fort Valley, Georgia. They manufacture school buses, have been around for 100 years. And we partnered with them back in 2012 to develop a propane fuel system for the Type C Vision bus. This has been one of our more successful programs. This partnership's been exclusive since we launched with Bluebird in 2012, and we just extended it this past year to take us out through 2030. So we're going to have a very extensive runway with Bluebird to continue our venture with them to deploy diesel alternative school buses in the school bus space, transporting our most precious cargo. So we talk to fleets about their alternative options. We try to paint the picture through their perspective, right? So fleets today are being tasked with doing more with less. Budgets are being cut. You want to move to the latest and greatest technology. Oftentimes there's pressure from above or below or outside to change to go electric or to go hydrogen or to go CNG or to do more with your fleet to green it. And when you look at things that fleet managers are tasked with, like managing their capital expense, managing their operational expense, reducing their emissions profile, making sure you've got a fleet that's resilient, right? You got to make sure that it'll run every day and it meets your route demands, and then still have the ability to get it repaired locally or get it repaired in-house to minimize your downtime. There's a lot of challenges there with some of these newer technologies. There's some challenges with some of the old technology, but we think propane fits a really nice sweet spot for fleets because it's a familiar powertrain that you're using. Serviceability is very easy. The fuel is widely available. You can save money by doing it. We think we got a really good story to tell with propane still here since we've been at it for almost 15 years now. When you look at another aspect of the fleet viewpoint, you've got the tried and true fleet or tried and true fuels that are available today for fleets that most are using still today. They have their pros and cons. Diesel and gasoline, they're familiar. They're widely available across every community. It's a relatively low capital expense, or at least it's a capital expense that fleets are used to. They're budgeted that way. But it also comes with some increasing complexity, particularly on the diesel side with emissions changes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Fuel pricing is always a challenge because there's a lot of volatility with fuel pricing. And of course, the environmental aspect, with changes coming again to the EPA and CARB requirements for emissions, it's going to get a little bit more challenging for the gasoline and diesel engine manufacturers to comply. That's ultimately going to drive some cost into their product, we think. On the other side of the road, you've got the new technologies, right? The electric vehicles, the fuel cell vehicles, tremendous upside for the environment. There's just a boatload of funding available through many channels today. And then, of course, you got lower operating costs with less moving parts. The cons to those two different options are, of course, high capital costs. So you need some funding or need some subsidies to offset. Typically, that doesn't box well within the context of your normal fleet budget. There's some duty cycle limitations with some of the product, right? I mean, fleets that need to go 200 miles a day, maybe those aren't a good option for them. And then the infrastructure, I think we've all heard some challenges that some communities have had or some customers have had, fleets and whatnot, with getting their infrastructure set up and set up timely. So there's been some challenges with that as well. EVs definitely here for the future. Fuel cell definitely continue to evolve and be a future fuel of choice for many fleets. But we think today propane really fills a nice void in the middle for fleets that are looking to go green and are looking for an option that is kind of more within their budget to get started. So propane really fits that sweet spot. Talk a little bit about why propane. It is a clean fuel. It does reduce tailpipe emissions. It is affordable. It's for incremental cost, you can convert to a propane alternative fuel with your gasoline vehicle today, and it's domestically produced. Talk a little bit about how much volume we have, but it is made here in North America with primary production happening here in the United States. Propane is the third most common engine fuel used in the world today. There's more than 27 million vehicles operating on propane across the globe. It has been in use in automobiles for more than 100 years. It does have that lower emissions profile than gasoline or diesel. There is readily available infrastructure in place across the entire country. Today, there's more than 3,100 public refueling sites across the country. There's 56 in Virginia alone, according to the alternative fuels data. Private infrastructure is available. It's also pretty easy to do. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. And then the lower cost versus traditional fuels like diesel or gasoline, typically 30 to 40%. We've got some examples later on in the presentation that talk about 50 to 60%. Propane is also propane is a byproduct of the many different things, but one is natural gas refining. So natural gas processing creates a lot of propane that gets stored. It's 100% domestic. It's used for space, water heating, cooking, and of course, as an engine fuel. Propane is in use in more than 48 million households. It's in use at over 900,000 farms. 600,000 forklifts use propane today, and 25,000 commercial mowers use propane. So it's widely available and being used across many different vocational uses. Propane production in the United States, we produce more than 30 billion gallons of propane a year, and we export about 2/3 of that. So we're only consuming about 10% of what we're actually producing here in the US. 20 billion are being exported to Europe to be used for other applications there. Talk a little bit about our product. And before I jump into this, I just want to say that our product is exclusive to the Ford powertrain. We typically are operating in that Ford medium duty fleet world, the commercial space, and the Bluebird Vision bus, but there are other products available. There's biofuel systems available that may be appropriate for fleets. The one thing I will say, if you're considering propane for your fleet, just do your homework. Dedicated propane fuel system was appropriate for me when I ran it in my fleet, but it may not be appropriate for you. So check out what's going on with biofuel as well. It's a great solution too. The products that we use: a Bluebird Vision school bus, the medium duty Ford truck chassis cabs, cutaways, and strip chassis. So the F650, 750, F53, F59, and E450 are the platforms that we are most commonly used on. We have some OEM ordering options because we do use that Ford purpose-built 7.3 liter V8 engine with everything that we do. We do have ship-through options available through Ford. So if you want to order a chassis and have it come to us to have your fuel system put on before it goes to your bodybuilder, we can have that done relatively seamlessly. Because we have always been Ford QVM and Ford QCM, quality vehicle modifier and qualified calibration modifier, everything that we do from our side with the fuel system integrated into the Ford chassis doesn't impact the Ford warranty. So your Ford warranty stays intact when you deploy propane on your Ford vehicle with the Roush Clean Tech fuel system. There's no loss of horsepower or torque or towing capacity, and it's serviceable today with existing diagnostic tools. We don't require any special diagnostic tools in order for you to service your vehicle. Liquid and propane injection systems offer a lot of improvements versus the prior technology that was available. We get better drivability in all temperatures. We get improved startup and better emissions, and we get that equal horsepower or torque to the gasoline counterpart. It's not like your grandfather's propane fuel system that you maybe had familiarity with back in the 80s or early 90s. That were vapor systems that were really unreliable in all temperatures, finicky in cold weather, finicky in hot weather. Vapor lock was a real thing with them. This liquid injection technology that we're using today to power our medium duty Ford products and Bluebird uses fuel pumps to maintain pressure within the system. So we're always getting liquid at the injection and point of ignition. That ensures a consistent performance out of the vehicle. Our propane fuel tanks are ASME certified. They're rated for the life of the vehicle. They're 20 times more puncture resistant than traditional gasoline tanks. They're made of ductile steel. And all fuel tanks are leak tested upon assembly at our factory and when they're installed on the vehicle to ensure that they're leak free and ready for service. I will say that this is one of the things that we get a lot of pushback on is the propane fuel tanks and Most commonly, when we talk to transportation directors or drivers, they're worried about being powered. They're sitting on a bomb. Because the tanks are made of steel and they are significantly more puncture resistant to traditional fuel tanks. It's not like what most folks are accustomed to. Growing up in the 80s, Dukes of Hazzard, you see, one of the Duke boys pull out a bow and arrow with a flaming arrow and shoot it through a propane tank in the back of a barn and it explodes. And that's just not reality. There's dozens of videos online through YouTube with different sheriff departments that are running propane tanks in the back of their police cruisers that have actually done tests on them, firing bullets at them repeatedly, trying to get them to puncture. Um, Fortunately, they've been unsuccessful, or better for us if they've been unsuccessful in getting them to puncture. So it is a really safe technology that is not anywhere near the way it's portrayed in the movies. Take a look at just a CAD drawing of our system and how it integrates on the E450 chassis. Our fuel tank mounts between the frame rails at the rear of the vehicle, just like a traditional fuel tank would. The fuel line also is at the rear of the vehicle, just as a typical fuel line or fuel valve would be. We use stainless steel fuel lines. We use the existing routing locations that Ford has set up. So we route along the inside of the frame rail. For our flex lines, they are stainless steel wrapped fuel lines. There's a lot of busy stuff going on under the hood, but that also includes all the wiring harnesses that we connect to. We are plug and play with our wiring harnesses in the Ford system as well. So there's no splicing. Everything is a hard pin-to-pin connection. We add a fuel rail pressure control module, which helps us regulate the flow of fuel into the fuel rail, the injectors, and then back to the fuel tank. I say back to the fuel tank because we do run a closed system. So anything that's not consumed at the engine does get cycled back to the fuel tank for future use. We have a fuel rail that we manufacture in-house at Roush and a propane-specific fuel injector that we also use. The only additional item that we add that's not called out here specifically is a smart relay module that helps bridge the communication between the Ford PCM and our fuel system. So it kind of ties all that communication together. But to open the hood and look under it and just with the naked eye, you'd see just a couple components that appear to be different. Everything else integrates very seamlessly. Just one product slide for the Bluebird Propane Vision bus. 7.3-liter V8 engine we just spoke about. It covers all wheelbase applications in the bus application. We do have 3 fuel tank options, the most common being the 93 usable gallon option, which will give a school district about 400 miles of use on a single fill up. We do have EPA and CARB certification on all of our products. This one goes up to 33,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, same as the F650, F750 chassis. And this particular bus can go up to 77 passengers. I mentioned our successful partnership with Bluebird over the last 12 years. We've been able to deploy more than 20,000 school buses across the US and Canada. We do have propane buses operating in every Canadian province and every state in the United States except for one. You'd be surprised to know that one is not Hawaii. We do have Type A school buses running on Hawaii. We do have Type C buses running in Anchorage, Alaska. But the one state that we haven't been able to deploy in yet has been Mississippi. So we're working hard to see if we can't close that loop and get Mississippi running propane here in the near future. Commercial deployment map looks similar for the United States. I will say that a little bit deceiving on deployment locations, but we do have some really good saturation. A lot of those upper Midwestern yellowish, greenish dots are Schwann's locations. So we started working with Schwann's a few years ago with their fleet, and we've deployed quite a bit with them. But there's a lot of individual fleets that are running propane across the country today. Just to look at a couple of different slides with some vehicle options. We've got Bimbo Bakeries up in the upper left, running the F59 chassis with a step van. Of course, the Schwann's truck in the upper middle. University of Pitt has some F550 shuttles. Down on the lower right, we've got F750 shock top, beverage delivery body, or straight truck delivery body. We've got AAA running a flatbed truck in Pennsylvania there in the middle and the bottom. And then Alpha Baking in Greater Chicago has been running propane for many years as well. Just a few more. We got a couple of different transit agencies, airport shuttle parking. Up in the upper left, we've got Ganada, which is an airport catering outfit running propane in their fleet, servicing the airlines. And then in the upper middle there, we've got U.S. mail contractors that started to pick up propane and are touting significant savings while lowering their environmental footprint, running propane as well. That's Lisa Maccabee in South Carolina there, I think, in the picture that we've got. So just a little bit on environmental benefits. Propane doesn't pose any harm to the groundwater, surface water, or soil. It's typically stored under pressure as a liquid at negative 44 degrees Fahrenheit. And when it's exposed to the atmosphere, it dissipates into the air as a vapor very, very quickly. So that's why there's no harm to the groundwater, soil, or surface water. Propane is also non-toxic, non-carcinogenic, and non-corrosive fuel. And the emissions profile on it compared to diesel is 90% less NOx, 80% reduction in hydrocarbons, and 100% reduction in particulate matter. You look at our emissions profile with the 8 major emission constituents that are measured, from NOx to HCHO, PM, NMHC to CO to the greenhouse gases. And as an average, we're running at about 70% cleaner across all 8 constituents today. So it's meaningful impact now with not a tremendous impact to your budget or without needing any significant grant funding. There are grant funding opportunities available, but we can show, and we have shown time and time again, that propane is a good, sustainable alternative fuel that can be deployed within the context of your normal budget. Schwann's touts, not to get in too far into the wording here, but I just wanted to highlight that Schwann's did a study and shared with us in a case study that their E450 propane autogas trucks emit about 91,000 fewer pounds of carbon dioxide emissions over the life of the vehicle. So, you look at, they had, at the time we did this case study, they were running over 600 propane powered E450s. That's a significant amount of emissions that are being displaced by running propane. And that was their former senior fleet manager that helped us pull this case study together, Danielle. University of West Virginia did a study to their CAFE group, the same group that blew the whistle or blew the lid off of the VW emissions cheating scandal. They ran a propane powered school bus and a diesel powered school bus side by side on identical routes. So we did an in-use study that actually Propane Education and Research Council did a in-use study with that group and found that in use, the diesel emissions actually spiked 4 times what their tested level were at times. And overall, the propane bus performed at 96% cleaner than the diesel bus in NOx emissions. We also saw a 13% reduction in carbon dioxide versus the diesel bus as well. So this study is available online through PERC. The full details along with all the data. I think there's about 70 pages of data you can go through. Just one more large fleet, Primo Waters, great partner of ours, more than 1,000 F650, F750 beverage bodies now running around delivering water and beverage across North America. Propane today makes up about 30% of their fleet. They didn't get specifics, but they did say based on the proven emission reduction compared with their older diesel units and lower total cost of ownership, they're confident that propane was right for their application with the alternative fuel space. So they hope to have about 50% of their fleet greened with propane here in the next couple of years. And then what's next? So, I mean, those couple of fleets running diesel with the diesel school buses and the Nestle Waters or Primo Waters. We have new emission requirements coming in 2027 that will require 0.03 grams of NOx per brake horsepower hour. That's another significant step down. It was supposed to be 0.02, but 0.02 has been pushed out to 2031. But our fuel system today meets that requirement, no matter the platform, whether that's a Bluebird Vision school bus or an E450 paratransit or an F650. We meet that 0.02 level today. So we're confident that we're going to be ready for the 2027 changes. And then the 2 images that you see there are what we were projecting diesel emissions might have to look like to meet those standards. So just additional hardware, additional complexity, additional cost. That's going to get a little bit more challenging for the diesel folks just to keep up with these ever-changing emission requirements. So then you have the option for renewable propane as well, just like biodiesel, renewable propane is unlike conventional propane. It's made from renewable sources, a variety of feedstocks. It's most commonly a byproduct of what's happening with renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel. Propane's a byproduct of that. You get renewable propane off of it. And it's plant, vegetable oils, animal fats, used cooking oil, all play a role in creating this renewable propane. As it's made, as renewable fuels are made in other ways, we're able to extract that renewable propane. And I bring it up just to compare. We talk about zero tailpipe emissions, but there's also emissions further upstream. When you look at carbon intensity of the electric grid, from extraction to power generation to transmission, the EPA estimates that the average carbon intensity score is about 130 across the board to generate a unit of energy. When you look at how that compares statewide, there's not many states that are below that 130 average. There's about a dozen or so that are 130 or lower. And if you compare what it looks like for propane from a carbon intensity score, just today as it sits, propane runs at about 79 on the scoring scale for carbon intensity to make a unit of energy. So, we're a little bit ahead of the curve when you look at well to wheels and where your power is coming from. There are 6 states that do a fantastic job on their power grids, where it's incredibly efficient to run an electric vehicle today. I'm by no means bashing electric. I talked about all the companies that we work with at the beginning. Many of those, or most of those today that we have coming to us, are people that are working in the battery electric, and autonomous space. So we're a big fan. We will always be a big fan, but we also think propane has a place to play here in the space as well. And then when you look at renewable propane from a carbon intensity score standpoint, depending on the feedstock, it runs anywhere from 26.5 to 40 on the scoring scale. So significantly lower, and that puts it, we're only one state. I think that's Vermont up there, that's primarily hydroelectric, is more competitive than propane is in a renewable standpoint today. And again, that's well-to-wheel scenario. Obviously, fleets are going to make a decision based on a variety of factors. It's just one piece that I like to point out. Total cost of ownership. So why would you consider propane? Well, when you look at the fleet, the fuel landscape trend over the last 2 years, just 2 years alone, we've seen fuel prices on the diesel side as high as $5 a gallon. We've seen it on gasoline close to $4 a gallon. And you look at that same 2-year time frame, that green bar on the bottom is the average cost of propane. And these numbers come from the EIA. It's not anything that I made up. It's stuff that we get right off the government's website, and we average it out every month. The propane average comes from one of our partners on the propane side, Alliance Autogas or Blossman Gas. They publish the weekly fuel averages across the 7 different regions of the country. So we use their data to come up with that propane average. And propane's been consistently more than $1 less per gallon than gasoline. Over this past 2 years, it's been more than $2 a gallon less than diesel, more times than it's not been, more months than it's not been. So significant cost savings with propane. What does that look like for fleet? Well, we have a variety of total cost of ownership calculators that we just look at the basics, right? We can't get too far into the weeds on total operating costs for all of your maintenance and all of your labor hours and all that kind of stuff. But there's a handful of items that we can pinpoint with accuracy just based on a fleet's use model, right, or vehicle cycle. So in this instance, we're looking at a school bus that's going to run for 12 years at 15,000 miles a year. We've got those fuel price averages plugged in at $1.68 a gallon today for propane, $1.23 for gasoline, and $3.60 for diesel. We also have electric at 14 cents a kilowatt hour. So when you look at the efficiency ratings at 4.5 for propane, 7.5 for diesel, 6 miles per gallon for gasoline, and 2.08 for EV, and you run the matrix just looking at the fuel, the oil PM, the fuel filter PM, what a diesel vehicle would use in DEF, an average on electric vehicle of 20% of what a traditional gasoline vehicle would cost for maintenance, because that's what the experts say. It's about 80% less. These are the numbers that you get, right? So without considering any vehicle pricing, your diesel vehicles are baseline. Our gasoline vehicle would run about $7,700 less than a diesel. Our propane, without any incentives, would run at about $21,000 more efficient, or create $21,000 in savings. If you rolled in the IRS's alternative fuel tax credit or tax rebate at 36 cents a gallon, those propane savings accelerate to $35,000 or almost $36,000 versus a diesel bus. And then on the EV side, of course, no vehicle pricing considered, but propane or EV runs at about $37,000 less to operate versus a diesel. Of course, when you start to plug in the cost of the bus, they fluctuate a little bit. So, propane bus is going to run about $9,000 higher than a diesel bus. An EV bus is going to run around $400,000. A diesel bus is going to run around $140,000. So those capital costs to purchase the vehicle play into this as well. But raw operating costs, propane's got a pretty good story to tell versus in this particular use case with a diesel school bus. Diesel is still the most widely used fuel for school buses today, which is mind-boggling to me, but we see more and more fleets every year making the switch to propane. So just a couple of examples from customers telling their story. I referenced that $5 a gallon. This is Crosby Ironton. We did a case study with them as they had a school bus that they had been running since 2013. About a year and a half, 2 years ago, that was coming up on 250,000 miles, so 250,000 miles on that school bus running on propane. And they were paying $5 a gallon for gasoline and $1.67 for propane. So propane offers a great opportunity for you to work with a provider that'll actually lock in your fuel price for a term. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but I just wanted to point that out. In this case, 67% fuel savings. Another one, Randolph Township Schools in New Jersey, 100% of their route fleet is run on propane, so 33 school buses. And their case study, they showed that they're running about 50% less to operate versus a diesel school bus. Got a transit agency in Georgia, CATS, Cherokee County Area Transit. Greg was really excited when he deployed his propane buses. He touted that he received 85% funding from the federal government versus 80%. So propane does qualify for the FTA's green initiative. So you can get funding for the additional 5% funding for the bus, and you can get also 90% funding for your refueling infrastructure. So that's another incentive that Greg took advantage of through the FTA funding because it met a specific green fleet initiative. So all in, Greg saved $10,000 per bus for the same versus the same gasoline model due to the higher FTA funding. And he was able to lock in his fuel pricing for a 3-year term at a 50% savings over gasoline. So significant when you talk about ROI. This is one of my favorites. Paul Strobis down in Broward County Transit. He was running propane. He's been running propane since 2014. But 2015, he started running E450 chassis with our dedicated fuel system on it. He's tracked his data really, really well. In a 7-year look before any alternative fuel tax rebates, he had $6.3 million in fuel savings, coming out to about $1.11 a gallon versus his gasoline buses. And when you factor in that 36 cent per gallon rebate that he got from the IRS, he saved an additional $3.4 million in savings, taking his average savings to $1.51 per gallon. So $9.8 million in fuel savings over the 7-year life cycle of those vehicles. And you see down towards 2020, they start to thin out a little bit. His gallons start to lighten up a little bit because he had to cycle vehicles out. There's requirements for how long you can run those vehicles. So most of his vehicles are starting to mileage out at that point. So his consumption became less. But he also touts that they reduced 133,000 pounds of CO2 annual on his fleet running those propane-powered school buses or propane-powered transit buses. So I mentioned that 36 cent per gallon rebate that the IRS offers. That's good through this year. I started running propane in my fleet in 2009. So this is an incentive that's been available through the IRS every year since 2009. There's been a couple years where they signed it into law and made it retroactive, but nonetheless, it's been available for fleets to take advantage of for the past 15 years. In that legislation is also infrastructure rebate as well. So 30% of the cost of your refueling infrastructure up to 30,000 gallons per property. And just a couple of comments on refueling. I'm not an expert on refueling, but I've been around it enough to kind of speak a little bit logically to it. You can get refueling put on your property for your fleet at relatively low cost to no cost. It's very scalable. I got a couple of photos that demonstrate that, and it's really efficient. So it pumps just like your traditional gasoline or diesel fuel sites do at 8 to 12 gallons per minute, and it can be portable. Right? You can start out with a completely portable trailer-based, skid-based setup where it can just go on a part of your property where you think it's adequate to stay long term, and your refueling provider will help you determine that. Most refueling providers will come on and work with you and do a site survey and determine where is an optimal place to put it based on the space that you have to work with and the setback requirements that the DEQ or local state folks or fire folks require. Once the spot is identified, a skid system can go in relatively quick. Uh, they'll have to speak to exact timing, but we've seen these go in a matter of a couple of months. So if you are considering propane vehicles, you definitely want to start working with a fuel provider in conjunction with determining which vehicle system you're going to use. We certainly hope it's ours. But you've got a 1,000-gallon skid system there on the left. You got, I think, a 1990 there on the right. Very similar, just one's permanent and one's mobile. I talked about the scalability. We've seen fleets like Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They're on the left-hand side that started out with one 1990. Now they've got four daisy chained together. So they just continue to add on as their fleet continue to grow. Upper Moreland, PA, they've got a 12,000-gallon propane fuel tank. Going to the higher volume tanks, it may not be optimal when you're starting out with just a handful of vehicles, 3 to 5 vehicles. You typically are looking at that lower 1,000-gallon tank. But you always want to keep your eye to the future. And if you think propane is a solution that's going to allow you to continue to expand and grow, looking at a 12,000 gallon like there on the right, or an 18,000 gallon like here in this last picture, it allows you a lot of flexibility with getting tanker loads, which makes it more efficient for the fuel provider to deliver, which makes your cost a little bit easier to negotiate. So although it's not optimal to put in an 18,000 gallon tank when you're just starting out and delivering a handful of vehicles, you want to keep that in mind as you do size up your fleet for propane. I will say that when I deployed my vehicles back in 2009, or started my deployments back in 2009, I took a realistic look at the fleet and identified that I could realistically get to about 65% running on propane. The other 35% would have to be something else, a hybrid technology or something else. So, when we talk to fleet manager, we try to paint the picture at, this may not be adequate for all your routes, but it could probably be ideal for a good portion of your routes. Continue or start your emissions reduction journey, and also provide you a significant return on your investment as you look to continue, as you look at future forward technologies and what may be next beyond electric or fuel cell, or as those technologies evolve to integrate into your fleet. So I think that's my last slide. Besides my close, it's propane again is a very ample domestic supply. It is really value priced for both the vehicle technology and the fuel price itself. There is a path to near zero with renewable propane. The infrastructure truly is one of the easier fuel infrastructures to implement. It is very safe by both composition and design. It does have built-in resiliency, something that I didn't touch on. I live in Florida, so we see frequently our customers like Pinellas County Schools or Broward County Transit or Palm Tran or Lee Tran use their propane-powered vehicles to evacuate people from the coastal flood areas because it's too difficult to line up and get gas, or it's too difficult to get your tanker delivered. Propane gets delivered relatively easy, so it's easier to use those propane vehicles to move your patients around, your community members around. And then lastly, there's, with our fuel system, there's no compromise in range or performance. So it's a great solution without compromising your range, your performance, or your fleet model. So with that, I'll turn it back over. Thanks, Greg.
Of course, Tom, thanks again for coming on the show today. I appreciate everyone listening and tuning in. If you'd like to know more about Virginia Clean Cities, feel free to follow the link below to join our mailing list. Or you can email me directly with my email below this video. And a special thanks to Tom and the whole Roush Clean Tech team. If you'd like to know more about Roush Clean Tech and propane as an alternative fueling source, please feel free to email Tom. He would love to talk to you and talk to you about propane. And with that, we're at a close for this month's Technology Happy Hour. Hope to see you next time. Have a good one.